It's March 13th here in Seoul, and I'm Kim Dami. We begin with the stories making the headlines at this hour, starting with the Constitutional Court's impeachment ruling. The Constitutional Court is ruling on the impeachment of 4 state officials, including prosecutors, who are accused of acting in line with the Yoon Suk-yeol administration's interests. While ruling on President Yoon's impeachment trial is unlikely to happen this week. As soon as U.S. President Donald Trump's 25% tariffs on steel and aluminum imports became effective, the European Union announced it's taking countermeasures on U.S. products, effective as of April 1st. Trump now underlines that he has flexibility on tariffs. Yellow dust from Mongolia and fine dust from China will shroud the entire country on Thursday, worsening the air quality until Friday. The Constitutional Court is delivering its ruling on the impeachment trial of Auditor General Choi Jae-hae and 3 prosecutors. While no ruling schedules have been set for President Yoon, the court decided to first rule on cases that are unrelated to martial law. Our Oh Soo-young starts us off.
Before issuing President Yoon Suk-yeol's impeachment verdict, the Constitutional Court is ruling on the impeachment of 4 state officials accused of acting in line with the Yoon administration's interests. On Thursday, the court is deciding whether or not to uphold the National Assembly's motion last year to impeach Chief State Auditor Choi Jae-hae on allegations he acted in the interests of the Yoon administration and conducted a weak audit of the relocating of the presidential office and residence in 2022. That move by President Yoon was criticised by his political opponents. Chair has claimed the charges presented by the opposition-led National Assembly are inaccurate and distorted. The Constitutional Court will also rule on the impeachment of 3 prosecutors, including Seoul Central District Chief Prosecutor Lee Chang-soo and members of his staff Jo Sang-won and Choi Jae-hoon, who have been accused of conducting a lenient investigation into First Lady Kim Gon-hee's alleged involvement in a stock manipulation case. The court has been working on 9 impeachment cases, 8 of which were pushed through by the Assembly after President Yoon's martial law on December 3rd last year. As it is pledged to prioritise President Yoon's impeachment case above all others, Thursday's ruling on other officials has drawn further attention to the timing of Yoon's verdict, which was initially expected this Friday. Typically, the court notifies both parties of the ruling date 2 days in advance. However, there has been no such notification so far. As political and public pressure, both for and against Yoon's impeachment, grows more fervent by the day, particularly after his release from detention, experts say the judicial bench is likely moving more cautiously to deliver a broadly acceptable decision to a highly polarised society. More than 2.6 million petitions, both supporting and opposing Yoon's impeachment, have been submitted to the court. Observers also say the ruling on whether or not to uphold Prime Minister Han Duck-soo's impeachment from office, as well as acting president in Yoon's place, is also likely to precede the presidential impeachment verdict, given that it's a strongly related matter that affects the nation's governance. In any case, a decision within the next few weeks is widely expected, as 2 justices are due to retire from the bench on April 18th. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
Now, over in the U.S., President Donald Trump's tariff threat continues, with the American leader now shedding light on reciprocal tariffs. Lee Seung-ja has more.
U.S. President Donald Trump on Wednesday stressed that April 2nd will be a very big day for the United States as his reciprocal tariffs go into effect. Trump slammed the previous administration for America's losses in trade, but said the U.S. will take back a lot of what was stolen from it by other countries. However, Trump also noted that he has shown flexibility on his tariff policy, rejecting claims that his policy implementation has been inconsistent, as seen through his on and off tariff impositions on Canada and Mexico. The U.S. leader also warned that once the tariffs go into effect, there will be very little flexibility. Meanwhile, U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer said on Wednesday that the European Union's new retaliatory tariffs against the U.S. came too little, too late. According to Greer, the EU's latest tariff on U.S. imports completely disregards the national security imperatives of the United States, adding that the bloc's trade and economic policies are out of step with reality. The comments come as the EU announced it will respond to Trump's 25% tariffs on steel and aluminum imports by imposing its own tariffs on U.S. goods worth over $28 billion, set to take effect on April 13th. Canada also announced its own retaliatory tariffs on nearly $30 billion worth of U.S. imports after the 25% steel and aluminum tariffs went into effect on Wednesday. Canada says it will follow a dollar-by-dollar approach and impose 25% tariffs on U.S. imports, including steel, computers, and sports equipment. Meanwhile, Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum says her country will wait until April 2nd to decide whether to respond to the steel and aluminum tariffs. 이승재, Arirang News.
Acting President Choi Sang-mok said Seoul and Washington can strive to reach more balanced and mutually beneficial ties on trade and economics, which would ultimately upgrade their bilateral alliance. In an interview with the Wall Street Journal published on Wednesday, Choi said that the South Korean government, along with the private sector, is fully prepared to improve trade with the U.S. Choi also noted that the trade surplus with the U.S. is temporary, adding that South Korea's shipbuilding could help the U.S. revive its naval shipbuilding industry. Now, Choi's interview was published on the same day that the Trump administration implemented the 25% tariff on steel and aluminum imports, including from South Korea. And Choi's interview came with anxieties here in the country that the South Korean firms are also no exception from Trump's reckless tariff policies. Our Moon Hae-ryun tells us more.
With the Trump administration's 25% tariffs on steel and aluminium imports kicking in starting Wednesday, South Korean firms are bracing for impact. Previously, exports were duty-free but capped at 2.63 million tons under a quota system. Now the quota is gone, but all shipments will face the tariffs, posing both risks and opportunities. As tariffs now apply to top exporters Canada, Mexico, and Brazil, South Korea, the fourth largest supplier to the U.S., may find new openings in the U.S. market. Still, the risks are significant, with intense competition such as cheaper steel products from Southeast Asia, as well as the inclusion of steel and aluminium-derived products, such as bolts, nuts, and springs, under the new tariff scheme. These products are primarily manufactured by small and medium-sized businesses, which have fewer resources to absorb the impact, making them especially vulnerable to financial losses. At a conference on Wednesday led by the Ministry of SMEs and Startups, industry insiders spoke up about their concerns. Shinjin Fasteners is one such company that produces nuts and bolts, with 35% of its sales dependent on exports to the US and Europe.
Developing new products to stay competitive isn't easy, especially when it comes to sourcing materials. It's not like there's a set supply from the start. You have to create value and generate demand through product development.
Another company, GJ Aluminium, discussed the challenges of diversifying its exports.
We're trying to focus more on Europe and Southeast Asia, but the challenge is that our facilities have primarily been set up for the U.S. market, and each of these new regions has very different requirements and characteristics.
In order to minimize the impact on domestic firms, the South Korean government is building a support system such as stabilization funds and 15 nationwide support centers, as well as gathering opinions.
It looks to be around 1,800 domestic farms that are currently exporting to the U.S. We want to move quickly with a survey to get a clearer picture of the expected impact and what kind of targeted support these businesses will need.
Following Industry Minister An Deok-geun's visit to Washington to establish a communication channel with the Trump administration regarding tariffs, the country's Minister for Trade is also due to visit the U.S. to continue talks. Moon Hae-ryun, Arirang News.
U.S. inflation cooled in February, something the White House credited President Donald Trump for. But it's not completely easing investor or consumer fears, as the data is not reflecting Trump's tariffs just yet. We connect with VOA correspondent Chris Keskehill. Welcome back, Chris.
Good to be with you.
Thanks for joining us. So, Chris, walk us through the latest inflation figure in the U.S. and also Trump's tariffs that are now in full swing.
Overall inflation for U.S. consumers was 3% in January. That was worse than the 2.9% inflation rate in December, which is what economists thought they would see again in January. The United States enacted 25% in new tariffs Wednesday on all steel and aluminum imports, ending previous exemptions that had been in place for several U.S. allies. This latest move affects imports from Argentina, Australia, Brazil, Britain, Canada, Japan, Mexico, South Korea, and the European Union. U.S. President Donald Trump says the tariffs are necessary to address the significantly increasing share of imports of steel articles and derivative steel articles from these sources, which threaten to impair U.S. national security. The EU responded Wednesday by announcing plans to impose tariffs on $28 billion of U.S. goods beginning in April. But Trump told reporters at the White House earlier today that he will respond. Canada also responded with $20 billion in retaliatory tariffs beginning Thursday.
Well, it looks like the 25% tariffs on all steel and aluminum imports are not just a concern for countries around the world. It is expected to take a toll on Americans and also could significantly raise prices for the Americans in the U.S. How is the general sentiment over there?
The Dow Jones Industrial Average stock market was down again today, but the S&P 500 and NASDAQ rose today. U.S. stock indexes had fallen for days, wiping out recent gains for investors. But trade issues are rippling through the economy, and even U.S. spirits producers are caught in the middle. The head of the Distilled Spirits Council said that the EU move to hike tariffs up to 50% is deeply disappointing and will severely undercut the successful efforts to rebuild U.S. spirits exports in EU countries. The EU is a major destination for U.S. whiskey, with exports surging 60% in the past 3 years after an earlier set of tariffs was suspended. But the leader of the powerful United Auto Workers Union agrees with Trump's decision to levy these tariffs. UAW President Shawn Fain said tariffs are an attempt to stop the bleeding from the hemorrhaging of jobs in America for the last 33 years. He's referring to the implementation of the North American Free Trade Agreement, or NAFTA, in 1992. Fain went on to say that tariffs aren't the end solution, but they are a huge factor in fixing the problem.
Well, Chris, as you know, there was a squabble between the U.S. and Canada yesterday with, Canada taking back its threat of a 25% electricity surcharge after Trump threatened to hike up the steel and aluminum tariffs to 50%. Now, what is Trump's strategy here?
Right. Let's start with what happened with Canada. Ottawa was spared an even higher set of tariffs after Trump backed down from a threat to push duties on Canadian steel and aluminum to 50%, double what he had promised. Then the leader of Canada's Ontario province, Doug Ford, who you see there, threatened to tax electricity sold to 1.5 million people in the United States. But U.S. and Canadian officials spoke Tuesday and agreed to reverse course. But as far as strategy, Trump and his advisors believe they will bring manufacturing jobs back to the U.S. through reciprocal tariffs and raising import tariffs. The administration wants to make it less attractive for companies to rely on cheap overseas labor and more attractive for those companies to invest in American workers and resources. Now, that shift would reduce the trade deficit and boost domestic economic growth, their thinking is. And they also want to move production of technology and prescription medicines to domestic sources to avoid some of the supply chain issues that came into play during the COVID-19 pandemic.
Well, on top of that, major banks are also reacting to Trump's comments earlier this week about possible recession risks. Now, how are they reacting to that comment?
Yes, the investment bank Goldman Sachs revised its growth forecast for this year down to 1.7% from 2.2% previously. It modestly increased its recession probability to 20%, because the White House has the option to pull back policy changes if downside risks begin to look more serious, it said. The chief investment officer and chief U.S. equity strategist at Morgan Stanley, another investment bank, predicted that the S&P 500 would drop to a low of about 5,500 within the first half of this year, down from its current level of about 5,700, before rallying to 6,500 by the end of the year. So mixed messages on what experts believe will happen with the economy this year.
Indeed. Last but not least, the Federal Reserve will hold its monetary policy meeting in the coming week. Now, should we expect a rate cut considering the recent situation and developments in the U.S.? What's the Fed's outlook on the U.S. economy?
Well, the U.S. Central Bank is expected to keep its benchmark overnight interest rate unchanged next Wednesday at its meeting. Financial markets expect the Fed to resume cutting rates again in June because of the softening economic outlook after pausing in January. The policy rate has been reduced by 1 percentage point since December when the Fed started its easing cycle. The central bank, of course, hiked the policy rate by 5.25 percentage points in 2022 and 2023 to deal with high inflation.
All right, Chris, thank you for connecting with us this morning. We appreciate it, as always.
Good to be with you.
The SPHEREx space telescope, part of NASA's mission to map the universe, is now in space in partnership with South Korea's Space Institute. SPHEREx was launched successfully on Tuesday from Vandenberg Space Force Base, California, aboard a SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket at around 8:10 p.m. local time. According to NASA, it later established successful communication with its near space network in Norway. The launch comes after several delays since late February due to rocket assessments and bad weather. And the mission will help scientists uncover how the universe formed and evolved. A day after Ukraine accepted a 30-day ceasefire deal, the White House says talks between the U.S. and Russia have taken place, while Trump ramps up pressure on Russia to accept the ceasefire proposal. Our Park Gon-woo tells us more.
According to the White House press secretary on Wednesday, U.S. National Security Advisor Mike Waltz spoke with his Russian counterpart to pursue ending the war and to strike a peace deal between Russia and Ukraine. That marked the first discussion between senior security advisors from the U.S. and Russia, following an agreement on a 30-day ceasefire proposal made between the U.S. and Ukraine in Saudi Arabia the day before. Also on Wednesday, U.S. President Donald Trump expressed his hopes that Russia would accept the proposal.
It's up to Russia now, and hopefully we can get a ceasefire from Russia. And if we do, I think that would be 80% of the way to getting this horrible bloodbath.
Trump also warned that Russia could face sanctions if it doesn't accept the deal, but added he doesn't want that to happen as he wants peace. He also said officials would be in Russia for further talks, with the White House confirming that Trump's special envoy, Steve Witkoff, is set to visit Moscow this week. A Kremlin spokesperson said on Wednesday that Moscow is waiting for detailed information from the U.S. before taking a stance on the peace deal. And following the deal between the U.S. and Ukraine, Russian President Vladimir Putin in military uniform visited the Kursk region on Wednesday for the first time since Ukraine invaded the Kursk region in August of last year. During the visit, Putin ordered the complete liberation of the Kursk region.
Our task in the near future is to completely defeat the enemy who has dug in on the territory of the Kursk region and is still conducting military operations here.
He also spoke about the need to consider creating a buffer zone inside Ukraine's Sumy region, which borders Kursk, to prevent any further incursions by Ukraine. Park Gon-woo, Arirang News.
Now, let's take a look at the stories from around the world with our Choi Ji-hee. Good morning, Ji-hee.
Morning, Dami.
So, Ji-hee, let's start with the updates on the train hijacking in Pakistan by separatist militants, which ended after a day-long standoff.
Right. So in Pakistan's Balochistan province, a military operation took place to save hostages on the hijacked train, killing all 33 militants. But during the standoff, 21 hostages as well as 4 other security personnel also lost their lives. On Wednesday local time, the Pakistani military initiated a comprehensive rescue operation on a train that had been ambushed by militants from the separatist Baloch Liberation Army the day before. The Jafar Express, carrying over 440 passengers from Quetta to Peshawar, had been hijacked by the separatist BLA. The militants detonated explosives on the railway track and launched rockets at the train, forcing it to a halt before seizing control of the train and taking hundreds hostage. The BLA had been demanding the release of Baloch political prisoners. Defense ministers from 5 European nations convened in Paris on Wednesday local time to discuss bolstering regional security and defense cooperation in the aftermath of the Ukraine war. The meeting comes amid Washington efforts to pursue a peace deal with Moscow. Defense ministers from the United Kingdom, France, Germany, Italy, and Poland discussed strengthening European defense mechanisms and providing security assurances to Ukraine amidst ongoing geopolitical shifts. Ukrainian Defense Minister Rustem Umerov also participated. A key point of the discussions was the potential establishment of a European reassurance force aimed at deterring future aggression and ensuring Ukraine's sovereignty. The deliberations also addressed the proposed Rearmed Europe plan, which seeks to mobilize up to 800 billion euros to boost Europe's defense infrastructure. Japan began the 11th release of contaminated water from the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant into the Pacific Ocean on Wednesday. The operation is part of an ongoing process to manage and dispose of water used to cool the reactors following the 2011 disaster. The International Atomic Energy Agency has confirmed that the tritium concentration in the discharge water is below Japan's regulatory standards, aligning with international safety guidelines. Tokyo Electric Power Company recently announced plans for the 11th batch of wastewater discharge from March 12th to 17th. In London, climate activists have protested against Tesla, targeting the company's robots to highlight environmental concerns. On Wednesday local time, 2 activists in West London poured orange liquid latex over a life-size humanoid robot at a Tesla store. Following political activities by Elon Musk, CEO of the car maker, a number of Tesla outlets in the U.S. and parts of Europe have also faced protests recently.
Much of Korea is on high alert due to dust levels. Yellow dust will spike fine dust levels across Korea, raising dust levels to very bad at times. Refrain from going outdoors without a face mask. And Incheon, Sejong, and Chungcheongdo provinces are at the attention level on the yellow dust warning system. Avoid outdoor activities if you're in those areas. While the air quality is not great, temperatures continue to be on the promising side. Readings will rise rapidly as we head towards the afternoon, leading to wide daily temperature gaps. And this afternoon, highs will be 1 to 4 degrees higher than yesterday. Seoul gets up to 15, Daegu, Gwangju, Gyeongju make it to 17 degrees. Mostly sunny skies will be blurred by that awful dust storm. Tomorrow looks like being warmer with a high of 18 degrees in the capital, and thankfully, air quality should improve. The mild weather continues through Saturday, but nationwide rain on Sunday will bring chillier air to start early next week. But for today, keep your face mask on.
That is all we have for our morning edition of Arirang News. We'll be back with more stories making the headlines at 5 p.m. Korea time. Thanks for watching.
아쿠아맨, 바다를 사랑하는 사나이, 바다는 내 영혼의 고향이자 안식처. 그런데 점점 바다가 심상치 않다. 아쿠아맨이 나서야겠다. 바다를 다시 바다답게 돌려놓자. 진정한 오션 마스터가 되는 그날까지. 주에 4번 정도 다이빙을 하는데 거진 뭐 제 안방이라고 생각하시면 되거든요. 근데 안방에 이제 쓰레기들이 가득 차 있으면 거기서 주무실 수 있습니까? 저는 못 잡니다, 거기. 그렇기 때문에 저는 이제 쓰레기를 줍어야 되겠다고 생각을 해서 이제 바다에서 쓰레기를 줍고 있거든요. 쉽게 말해서 일반적으로 밖에 있는 쓰레기들이 거진 다 물속에도 다 있다고 보시면 됩니다. 그러니까 예전보다 바다 환경이나 쓰레기가 너무 많다 보니까 사람들 인식 자체가 이제 쓰레기를 같이 주워오는 경우들이 많거든요. 그래서 예전보다는 훨씬 사람들이 인식이 많이 바뀐 것 같아요. 일단 캐릭터가 있잖아요. 아쿠아맨 복장을 하고 쓰레기를 줍고 다닌다. 폼 자체가 다르지 않습니까? 저는 거기에 대해서도 뭐 재미를 느끼는 것도 있지만 이제 쓰레기를 줍고 있다는 것도 같이 보여주는 그런 의도가 좀 많죠. 그런 활동을 한다는 거를 이제 조금 이제 사람들한테 이제 알렸으면 좋을 것 같아요. 알리면서 이래 하는데 같이 하지 않을래 이런 식으로 권유도 하고 그렇게 다이빙을 하면 괜찮을 것 같아요. 나는 바다를 온몸으로 사랑하는 그리너이다.
We're here to bring a new type of news show. New insights, new styles, and new topics every day.
We're News Generation.
Bringing news just for you. It's Thursday, March 13th here in Seoul. I'm Song Yujin, and you're watching News Generation. Joining us today is Cheska Dainhong.
Happy Thursday, everyone.
Happy Thursday. And we're pleased to have Julie and Kim back.
Yay!
Happy Almost Friday.
Happy Almost
so
Friday.
Good to be back here
Great
today.
to have you back too. Now both are here to speak on behalf of those in their 20s and 30s. As usual, we're going to begin our show today for this Thursday with our keyword news. Our keyword for today is golf. Now we previously discussed on NewsGen how golf has surged in popularity among Korean millennials and Gen Z in recent years, driven by a post-pandemic increase in outdoor activities and the sport's newfound appeal among the younger generations. However, this trend seems to have reversed course here in the country. According to local media, the number of golf course users nationwide has been declining since 2023, and additionally, South Korea's golf apparel market shrunk from around $2.6 billion in 2023 to approximately $2.4 billion in 2024, which has led to major brands to close stores or even withdraw from the market. So do you play golf, and what do you think is behind this shift in playing golf?
Yeah, so I actually learned how to play golf like around, I would say, last summer. And I did it because I wanted to put the effort towards going outside the house more. And I wanted to start a new hobby. But I'm going to be completely honest, it was really difficult for me to get into. For me, I guess I just didn't find it as fulfilling compared to other sports that I personally like to enjoy. And as for why the trend in general is fading, I think several factors are at play. Cost and accessibility are a major concern. And there's also a growing negative perception of golf due to the environmental impacts and its association with elitism. Additionally, golf is a very technically challenging sport, so casual players do find it more difficult and might give up more easily, is my guess. But at least that's the case for me too.
I think it's relatively a very hard sport, especially as you mentioned. It's hard to learn it. It's hard to continue because of the cost and also the environmental impacts.
Exactly.
Now, what about you, Cheska?
You know, the funny thing is, I played golf when I was 9. 9? Yeah. Wow. So way before this this boom for golf started, and I started in New Zealand. But back then it was more of like a family sport. You dress very casually. You know, you go out with your grandparents, just have a really lovely day. You know, walking around the fields. So conversely, when I came back to Korea as an MZ, to be very honest, I actually stopped playing golf because I didn't find it efficient in terms of time and cost. So I still have friends who play golf, and I definitely see the appeal. Like, you get to be out in the nature, mingle with friends, and even network with colleagues. But I think there's a lot of hurdle, like in terms of time, cost, and as Sang-jun mentioned, you know, perception of what golf is here in South Korea. For it to become more of a daily sport, not so much like an elitist sports or, you know, very specialized sports as it is,
I mean, trades come and go. So before we had a really big tennis boom, and then it went to golf. So who knows which sports will become big in Korea.
There no tennis boom was a thing.
Oh, yeah. And that was our keyword news for this Thursday. So we're now going to move on to our main discussion of the day. Thursday is when we shine the spotlight on the Korean wave and the global appeal of Korean culture. Take a look at the screen to find out more.
2025 marks a historic milestone for Korea. This year commemorates 80 years since Korea's liberation from Japan's colonial rule, as well as 60 years since the normalization of diplomatic relations between South Korea and Japan. As Korean culture continues to capture global attention, more people are not just enjoying K-pop and K-content, but also showing deeper curiosity about Korea's history.
So, at first glance, history and pop culture might seem worlds apart. K-pop, K-dramas, and variety shows are the big trend these days when it comes to K-culture, while history has often been viewed as something academic and distant. So I want to ask you, Cheska, what is drawing K-culture fans more into Korean history, and how are they accessing all these information and history in general?
Usually, as you mentioned, I mean, history has this connotation of being academic, but I think the most accessible medium so far has been content, especially the booming and growing K-dramas and K-movies. So among Korean wave fans, a lot of them actually learn about Korean history through watching these content, as many of them actually incorporate Korean history into its storyline. For instance, we have the historical genre, like period film. In Korean, we call it 사극, and it has become quite popular among K-wave fans. And also movies like Harbin that recently came out, and K-drama Mr. Sunshine all deal with the Japanese occupation period. So is Pachinko, Pachinko, which I think a lot of viewers know and is very popular. And movies like Taxi Driver or the drama Times of May, they take place during the democratization movement period, which is also very, very critical and important to a lot of Korean people. And films such as Ode to My Father are set in the Korean War, so already you can see that a lot of these popular content deal with Korean history. And in order to understand and really immerse oneself into the emotional storyline and the epic storyline that goes on, I think people are learning more and more about Korean history this way.
Right, so the more they actually know and learn about Korean history, the more they can resonate with these
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's the same for us when we watch something and we understand the background history. We get so emotionally more attached to it, right? Yeah, I think it's
definitely. Then, Julie, I want to ask you, is there any data that really highlights this growing global interest in Korean history?
Yeah, so according to a survey conducted by the Seoul Tourism Organization, palaces and historical sites were the most visited tourist attractions by international visitors, with 70% respondents saying that they visit the sites. This suggests that foreign tourists favor historical landmarks over theme parks or recreational facilities, and 55% reported visiting landmarks and theme parks, while 49% visited resorts and rest areas.
That is very interesting. Historical sites in Korea are climbing up the charts when it comes to which popular tourist attractions exist here in Korea. Now, before we move on, we also asked our viewers, if you could visit one historical site in Korea, which would you choose and why? And here are 3 of their responses. Our first comment for this Thursday is by Sheepkid1. I definitely like to visit museums that feature Korean history and the Korean War. Benny D97, Gyeongju, to experience a Hanok stay there, and then Gamcheon Cultural Village in Busan. I'd also love to visit the DMZ, the Korean Demilitarized Zone. Finally, Studio Visionary Anna says, I would like to check out Deoksugung Palace and do a Hanok stay. Plus, I would really like to wear a hanbok as it looks so pretty. Well, thank you for all those lovely comments. So for those who are interested in Korean history but don't really know where to start, we've got some good recommendations for you on NewsGen. So each of us 3, will introduce a historically significant place that's worth visiting. So we're going to start with Cheska.
So let's take our viewers on a little bit of emotional roller coaster. Since we are talking about the Japanese occupation period, I think it will help a lot of viewers, not just in terms of historical education, but also for the viewers to further enjoy many of the popular K-drama series and movies also, including Pachinko and Gyeongsang Creatures from Netflix. And there's a very important historical site one can visit, which they're seeing right now, called Seodaemun Prison in Seoul. I think the closest analogy is that of Nazi concentration camp, and for this particular reason, actually a lot of international tourists do visit this place. It is a prison that was built by the Residency General of Japan in 1908 to imprison Korean independence activists who fought against the cruel colonial regime.
Right.
Now, this place is very symbolic of many things: grief, pain, cruelty, but also this unwavering spirit of the freedom fighters. And I've actually visited once to give a tour to a group of international tourists. And when you actually walk in, you get this sense because you see the traces and remnants of this unspeakable and malicious torture that Japanese soldiers at the time inflicted upon the freedom fighters. And historically, it's been told that they devised over 70 methods to torture people. And what really breaks your heart, especially if you're Korean and you walk into the space, or anyone, as a matter of fact, is the fact that you can really tell that the Japanese soldiers devised every possible way to destroy people's spirits, including their coffins and boxes filled with needles. And they would throw 20, 30 people into a space that could barely hold like 5 grown adults, and beating them up and starving them. And then they would lock them up in an upright coffin, so that not only would they be claustrophobic, but they would be emotionally destroyed and would lose the will to fight for freedom. And I would highly recommend it to anyone and everyone who wants to understand what Koreans actually fought for in history.
Right, especially once again, as this year marks 80 years of Korea's liberation.
Exactly, yeah, it's a very important year too.
Right, definitely. And if I may add on, there are free Dawson tours available at this Seodaemun prison that's offered in 4 languages, Korean, English, Chinese, and Japanese. And you can find more information about the opening hours and the admission fees on the official website, which is also available in these 4 languages. So we're now going to move on to our second recommendation. I would like to basically recommend one of the 5 royal palaces in Seoul. These palaces are some some of the most well-known historical sites here in Korea, but I specifically like to recommend the Deoksugung Palace in central Seoul. Now, although this palace is smaller than Gyeongbokgung or Changdeokgung palaces, this palace is a blend of Korean and Western architectural styles that really make it unique. And specifically, one of its key landmarks is a Jungmyeongjeon Hall that you're currently seeing on the screen now. It was originally built as an imperial library in the late 1890s during the short-lived Korean Empire era. And beyond its beauty, this hall carries a really painful chapter of Korean history. This is where the Ulsa Treaty was forcibly signed in 1905 under Japanese pressure, stripping Korea of its diplomatic sovereignty. So this kind of links to what Cheska mentioned because the treaty was kind of like the start of this painful history of Korea. So
I was actually kind of thinking that too. It links right with
right. So now we're going to move on. We're going to travel a bit more later in the 20th century. So Julian, what's your pick?
Yeah, so I highly recommend visiting the DMZ, the demilitarized zone. It's about a 3.5-hour drive from Seoul, and I believe it's worth seeing because it plays a huge, crucial role in Korea's modern history, and it is something that remains to be highly relevant today.
Right.
The DMZ offers insight into the Korean War and provides a unique, sobering experience unlike anywhere else in the world. I actually first visited when I was in high school, and while I learned about the Korean War and the atrocities behind it, seeing it firsthand, witnessing the raw, unfiltered reality of Korea's division was truly an eye-opening experience, and I think it's really, really worth visiting if you're there. And it serves as a powerful reminder of the lasting impacts of the war that is technically still going on to this day right now. Visitors can see the militarized demarcation line, underground tunnels dug by North Korea, and other significant landmarks in the area. And one important note, for those who are planning to visit, make sure you bring a passport as entry requires passing through a restricted civilian-controlled zone. And fortunately, there are many tourist groups that operate daily going from Seoul to the DMZ, making it very easy and convenient to visit. So if you're interested, I highly recommend using these services.
Definitely. All right, so now after the break, we'll be joined by an American graduate student currently studying Korea to gain more insights into this growing fascination with Korean history. Stay tuned.
NewsGen wants to hear from you. Go to YouTube and search our channel Arirang News. Click Community and leave a comment down below. Make a new type of news with us.
We're pleased to be joined today by Christopher Gao, a graduate student from the U.S. currently attending Seoul National University. Great to have you back on the show, Christopher.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us. So, Christopher, we'd first like to ask you, what made you interested in Korean history in the first place?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that led me to become interested in Korean history in the first place was ironically what I was not taught about it during grade school and high school. So we always learned about, World War II in great detail, but then I feel like we either barely touched on or entirely skipped the Korean War in this rush to discuss the, Vietnam War, which I think is a testament to how much that conflict kind of dominated the American conscience in the, the latter half of the 20th century. But once I had the opportunity to kind of learn more in detail about the Korean War through some coursework in undergraduate, I think that opened up a lot of questions for me about how Korea ended up as this proxy for great power conflict and how the peninsula ended up divided in the first place after World War II, and then ultimately who bears responsibility for that division, which lasts until today. So I think that for me was the impetus for wanting to dive deeper and learn about this history, which is still highly relevant and connected to the current events as they're unfolding.
Christopher, I really admire that you really wanted to investigate something that was actually missing from the education. Korea's history spans over 5,000 years, as you may know, with countless significant diplomatic and political events that happened over the course of years. Which historical events are the most widely recognized overseas, would you say?
Right. So, yeah, despite there being, this 5,000-year history, I do think that in reality, like a lot of the, international recognition is going to be more about these like modern Korean historical moments. So first, I think despite how many gaps there might be about this in our education, I still think the Korean War is one of the most well-known aspects of Korean history. Obviously, is a major Cold War conflict, and many people, Americans or people of other nationalities, might have had relatives that even fought in that war, and my family also did. So that would be one reason that would be in the international kind of recognition category. But second, I think Korea's incredible economic development. So obviously the Miracle on the Han River is also pretty well known. A lot of people seem to be aware that Korea went from one of the poorest countries in the world to now the 12th largest economy and a leader in high-tech and heavy manufacturing. So I think this one is also big because Korea's kind of, experience with economic development is a very powerful, instructive tale for those in developing countries who are looking to replicate these successes in industrialization and education-centered development that were achieved here. So I think that's another big one. And then third, this one is I would say it seems to be more recently recognized with the democratization movements in the 1980s, like Gwangju Uprising, and those are increasingly recognized, I would say, in the foreign press and stuff for their role in shaping the vibrant democracy that South Korea is today. And I think we saw more recognition of this in particular in the international press, especially after martial law was declared late last year. So the world saw Koreans immediately mobilize to block this, that attempted self-coup that happened. And I think a lot of people saw how that fairly recent history of democratization has led people in this country to be highly civically engaged, even amid these renewed challenges, and how, even amid those challenges, how vibrant Korean democracy is as a result of that history.
Yeah, so hi, Christopher. I think it was really important that you mentioned that the American education system didn't educate us on history of other countries, because as a fellow American, I also felt that way too. So going off of that, are there any other historical events or moments that you think deserve more attention globally?
Right. So I think one historical event people would probably be interested to know more about might be the late 16th century Imjin War with Japan, so specifically Admiral Yi Sun-shin's victories against that much larger Japanese navy with that tactical use of turtle ships, which was allegedly the first ever ironclad warship that Korea developed. So I think this moment, beyond being an impressive victory, speaks to something broader about Korean history. So obviously there's this larger context where Korea repeatedly found itself in the crossfire or directly in the crosshairs of larger regional powers, whether it be China, Japan, or later those Western imperial powers. So there have been many challenges to Korean sovereignty through its history. And I think Admiral Yi Sun-shin and these turtle ships really embody this kind of underdog spirit and resilience in the face of adversity that has defined Korea's historical experience. And that same sense of resilience, I would say, is very much apparent in modern Korean history as well, with the country crawling from the shadow of conflict to become a leading economy and democracy. So I think in that way, this earlier historical moment would be worth knowing, that Imjin War and the Admiral Yi Sun-shin, in that context of the repeated invasions and conflict that occurred on or around the peninsula, and also in light of what that says about the national kind of conscience in Korea today.
Definitely. All right, Christopher, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts today. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Thank you. Right, so as we mentioned earlier at the top of our show, this year is a big year for Korean history with some major anniversaries. Now, what this means is that we're gonna see a series of special events and commemorations. They've already taken place, some will take place. So, Cheska, what can we expect ending off?
Since we are celebrating the 80th anniversary of liberation, I think it is definitely monumental. And even if you can't visit Korea, I hope you can, but there will be a lot of events related to showcasing movies, possibly contents about freedom fighters and Japanese occupation in your local Korean Cultural Center. So please do take time to check them out, because as Christopher mentioned, you can learn so much about Korean spirit, the resilience, and what we really stand for when you go through and understand the kind of history that we went through. And even if you do happen to be in Korea during August 15th, in Korea we call it 광복절, literally Liberation Day, I'm quite confident there will be a lot of contents and events happening here, and you'll be able to come and participate and learn more about the Korean history.
Definitely. Now, anything you'd like to add to, Julian?
Yeah, so like everyone mentioned, this year is significant for Korean history with major anniversaries like the 80th anniversary of Liberation Day. We can expect various commemorative events, including government ceremonies, exhibitions, and international awareness campaigns. And also the cyber cyber diplomacy organization VANC, also known as the Voluntary Agency Network of Korea, is also planning various campaigns for the 80th Liberation Day, such as honoring a 21st century foreign independence activist and using AI technology to promote Korea's history globally.
Wow.
Details are available on the website for those who are wanting to participate.
Definitely a lot to look forward to in terms of Korean history in 2025. And that's all we have for this episode of News Generation, but we will be back tomorrow, Friday at 10:30 a.m. Korea time. Special thanks today to Jessica Dainhong.
Pleasure's always mine. Thank you.
Thank you. And Julian Kim.
Thank you for having me today.
Thank you. And to our viewers, thank you for your time and hope you tune into our show tomorrow as well. We are
News
Generation.
How to survive in Korea. Weddings. Step 0. Attire. As a guest, dress formal to business casual. Avoid wearing all white, shorts or going topless. Step 1. Arrival time. Arrive 30 minutes prior to the wedding ceremony. Too many cars, too many halls, too many people. There are many twists and turns. Take pictures and shake hands. And write your name vertically, not horizontally, in the guest book. Step 2. Or, shibor. 50,000 won, 100,000 won, 150,000 won. Cash gifts are given in these units. Decide on the amount based on your relationship. Write your name vertically on the envelope. Step 3. Wedding etiquette. Fill up the front row. Guests have 3 duties to fulfill: clapping, cheering, and taking pictures. Step 4. Dining. Take off your jacket. This will be your seat from now on. Start with the not your everyday delicacies. Galbijjim. Yes. Bosa. Yes. Chili shrimps. Definitely yes. Kimbap. Yeah. Only if you can't live without it. No need to pile up food. You have more than one opportunity. Did you survive the wedding? Wait. Did someone catch your eye? What are you waiting for? You're looking fine today.
Capturing your day starts new day at Arirang.
A global conversation through the unique lens of millennials and Gen Zs. News Generation.
From politics to culture, delivering news from home and abroad. The Daily Report. A profound analysis of Korea by members of the media. Press Perspective.
A distinct perspective and a broader view. News Center.
A compelling discussion spotlighting domestic and international affairs within the frame.
Opening new vistas through a window of truth, connecting Korea and the world. Your pick, Arirang News.
원이에요? 네. 10,000원이네, 10,000원.
장난감들이 억수로 많이 있습니다. 가서 보시면 깜짝 놀랍니다. 아마 완구를 비롯한 영화 완구가 이층에 억수로 많이 있습니다. 억수로. 가서 보시면 깜짝